What I put on the board here, just to explain that, which is, I'm going to give you these little glimpses of method to my madness, right? So the group exercise that you did, and then the dialogical feedback that we did, some of the things that strike me as important to that, fun and laughter and so on, it's actually good for your brain. It actually opens up your brain to new ideas. There is an incredible power in humor, well used, right, to just sort of open up learning, right? It disarms people and it makes it fun. So your discussions was fun, right? You had a good time. I could tell you did. Don't tell me you didn't have a good time, because I know you did, because I was watching you. So active engagement. I am very much a proponent of the idea that learning is an active enterprise, and that the more engaged you are, the more that you're handling and touching and dealing with the clay, molding the clay, the more hands-on it is, the better. The more kindergarten, it's the better. So the more engaged you get with the material, the better it's going to stick, right? Dialogue. I'm a big believer in a dialogical form of learning and going back and forth. Partly I believe in that because of what we just looked at in a text like John chapter 4. How does Jesus teach? And we're going to look at this more in just a minute. Largely in conversation. Not very much by set pieces of long lectures. Yes, there are some of those, and that's part of the variety, but there's far more dialogue along the road, over the dinner table, right? In spontaneous settings, it's dialogue, it's discussion. It's part of life. Learning is built into life. It's not segmented out of life, right? So the dialogue that you guys had, you were able to debate back and forth. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? I agree with this. Let's add that piece, right? That's sort of pulling together your ideas and learning from one another, and then entering into dialogue back and forth with one another and with me, right? So a lot of good things happen with that, because what's happening is you're doing active thinking, and you're not just in a passive receptive mode. Okay, I'm generally always trying to stimulate a more active engagement. Right? Passivity is the enemy of learning. Activity, brain activity, hands-on activity is very much conducive to generating more learning. Right? Which is what I want to do. Get as much learning happening as a deeper level as possible. So dialogue is one of the things that does that. Right? It also keeps you interested. Right? That discussion that you had was almost a half an hour I gave you in the end. I didn't tell you how much time it was that you were being given, because I wanted to leave it open-ended and let it just play itself out. And you guys kept going and going and going for quite a long time, interestingly. If you were petering out, I would have jumped in sooner, but it had a certain kind of life that was going really, really well. Listening to someone for a half an hour straight is very, very hard to do, right? Your mind starts going all over the place, right? The attention span is not very long, and it's actually getting shorter and shorter. There's all kinds of studies that psychologists are doing of this, and all of these funny little devices are not helping our attention span, right? So everything's turning into sound bites, right? And our world is not better because everything is turned into a sound bite, I can assure you. So that dialogue is important. This means shared quest, a shared pursuit. I gave you guys some tasks to do together. I gave you questions to answer, and that drew your group together so that you had something that you were working on together. There was a problem to solve. There were questions to answer. It was a shared exercise, which creates an environment where you need to actually help one another to get to better answers, right? So a shared pursuit is actually very important. It builds community, and it builds a context where you can learn from one another, right? Very important. Overall, I'm always trying to do that, to broaden that out. Each group is good, the different groups that huddled up here, and then trying to pull the whole group together to be on a shared pursuit together, right? A shared pursuit of whatever the big question is, whatever the big goal is that we have of our learning. Creating a sense of learning community. Particularly important, I think, for adults, but it's also something that kids love to do, right? Set kids a problem and they'll become a group of people to solve that, and they'll have a wonderful time connecting together. Right? So the shared quest is important. And then overall, partly in a sense, all of this, these all sort of cascade down to what I'm after at the end of the day is that people will make the thing that we're learning their own. Right? It's like, well, Jeff thinks this about teaching. I want some of these ideas to become your own, right? And as you chew on them, wrestle with them, adapt them, translate them into your own language, make them your own, right? So make it a part of you. Make it something that you can work with. Make it something that you can apply to a new situation so that it becomes a part of you somehow, right? Not just that it's passed through sort of my lecture notes through your piece of paper, writing it down, and it's been, tested and it's over with, right? I'm interested in a more deeply held sense that this really is something now that's mine, right? The transformation that we talked about with the woman at the well, you could just illustrate by saying, the truth of who Jesus is, she has now made her own, right? And the proof of that is she's willing to enact it. She's willing to act on it. She's willing to talk about it. She's willing to share it, right? So it has become her own, right? So with anything that I'm teaching, I want people to make it their own, right? Not just that it's mine, not just they say, oh, that was a nice talk. I heard that. Right? Okay, good. But that's not really what I'm interested in. I'm interested in creating the conditions through various kinds of process so that people can make the learning their own. Make the content, make the discovery, make the insight, whatever it is, make it their own. Then at a deeper level, they can use it and they can pass it on to somebody else. Okay? So there's a method to that whole madness. Okay? So it's active learning, engagement, ownership, and ultimately transferability that I'm after. Okay? Any questions, comments about that? That's a whole model of what learning is about. Okay?